arterial line sampling. So what we've got set up here is we've got a bag of simulated blood and a bag of flush solution, and that's going to be our arterial line flush solution. You can see we've got on the pigtails here. I've had to put it in that way just because of the way I've had to set this up. But you've got your transducer connection that'll actually connect to the monitor. That'll give you your waveform up onto the monitor. If you're going to flush the arterial line, these two little white tabs are what you're going to want to squeeze to be able to allow saline flush to go through the tube in here. You'll also notice that I've got this in a pressurized bag. You know, in real world environment, that's going to have to be a pressurized bag as well, because the pressure is going to have to exceed that of the arterial system so that you can have flush going through there. Because if that pressure bag were to not be there, the blood pressure in the arterial system is obviously more, so the individual would bleed out into that bag or pump a liter of blood into that bag. So when you're going to be, and then this is just going to be our simulated patient blood. I had to rig up a bag so that you all will actually be able to draw off of that. So ultimately, what you're going to see here is an old school setup. You'll probably have an inline system, or what's called a vamp system, that you'll pull from, which has got a 10 cc syringe built in line. You'll pull your waste within the circuit, and then the waste will actually be given back through the circuit. But this is an old school setup. You've got your three-way stopcock. With the way that the three-way stopcock is set up, whatever direction that this is pointing is off. So for instance, now I'm off to this port. If I turn this that direction, I would be off to the monitor, because the monitor is going to be over this direction. If I turn this three-way stopcock this direction, now I'm off to the patient. And so if I needed to draw up any flush solution or anything of that nature, I could turn this off to the patient. Make sure that this is always off to this open port here, because if this cap were off and you turned it off here and left it, patient's just going to bleed out. So it is super important to make sure that you've got that stopcock turned the correct way. You'll also take a alcohol prep and clean the sampling hub. I'll demonstrate this a little bit better in class, because I'm trying to hold a camera with one hand and do everything else with the other. But you try to get a sterile gauze, set that aside, because you're going to want to take this cap off first. You'll mute your alarms, and I'll set this up on a simulated patient with an actual alarm that we can go through the motions. But for the overall gist of what we're doing right now, just want you to be able to know how to turn, because there are, you go through your indications, your contraindications, silencing the alarm while we go over silencing the alarm, so that they don't think that the patient's gone into cardiac arrest. But anyway, you'll want to make sure that you take this cap off. Make sure that you lay that so that the tip of the cap remains clean. So on a sterile gauze, you then take your alcohol prep and clean. You may take an alcohol prep or a chlorhexidine prep, and you're going to clean the port off. Then what you'll do is you will attach your waste syringe. You'll utilize a lure lock connection syringe. I'll try to do this. Tell you what, let me see if I can just right quick try to set this up so that you can at least just see what I'm doing. All right, I think I can get everything in frame there. So your waste syringe, these are going to come out. So you got a waste syringe and a sample syringe. These are going to be sterile. They'll be in sterile packaging, so pull them out of your sterile packaging. After you've cleaned that with either chlorhexidine or alcohol prep, we'll give it time to dry. You're going to now attach your lure lock. Now it's time to withdraw the waste solution. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn this off to the monitor. And now this is going to allow us to pull back our waste. And go ahead and pull it back, because we're going to give this back. Some places you may discard the waste, but we're going to give it back. So turn this back off before you disconnect your syringe, because if you leave this open and you disconnect, every time the patient's heart beats, it's going to pump blood out of that port. You don't want that to happen.
Go ahead and disconnect your syringe. Lay that on another sterile gauze that you've set aside, and you may not be able to see it because of the way the camera's sitting, but I've set more sterile gauze here. Lay that there. Then you're going to take your sample syringe and go ahead and attach it. Now this is a slip tip, so you can just press that down in there. You're going to close this back to the patient because now you just got fresh blood. It's not diluted with any saline or anything of that nature. It's fresh blood in the tubing. Turn that down, and then you can draw you up about a half a cc or so of blood for your blood gas analyzer. Close that, disconnect. While that's like that, you can go ahead and cap your sample, get the air bubble to the top, and evacuate any remaining air from your sample. You can set that aside. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give our waste blood back to the patient. So go back in, luer lock it down, close to the monitor. Before you push the blood back in, sometimes there can be an air bubble in train. You want to make sure that you're not flushing any air into the arterial system. You don't want any air embolism to be in there. So make sure that you pull up on the plunger. And if there is an air bubble in there, fortunately I had a good liquid-liquid interface and it didn't, there was not an air bubble. But I'm also going to watch to make sure that there's not any air that gets in training, because this is simulated blood, so you can see that that's red or pink all the way through, and you'll be able to see if there is indeed an air bubble there. If there is an air bubble, you want to pull back and make sure that that's not introduced to the patient. So I've already pulled back on my plunger. Now I'm going to give my waste solution back, or my waste blood back, and I'm watching this line all the time to make sure that I'm not flushing an air bubble back to the patient. So now that I've pushed that back through, and I typically don't ever bury the plunger all the way down because I don't want any air bubble to be in there. So now what I'll do is turn the stopcock off to this position, to the syringe. You can discard that last little bit of waste there. And then what you want to do is flush the line back to your patient. In order to do that, what you're going to do is squeeze these little white pigtails, the little things over here that I had mentioned. So you'll squeeze those. As you begin to squeeze those, you'll notice that the fluid clears, and it should clear all the way back to the patient. And if it's not, you can always put a little bit more pressure on this bag, just like you do a blood pressure cup. Because when you squeeze this, it really should begin to clear up and bleed back to the patient. You can see that tubing is clearing up each time that I'm flushing that. You're going to want to flush until you see that clear back up all the way back to the patient. And then last but not least, you're going to have a little bit of blood left in this hub. So I always like to flush out the hub as well. Take you a sterile gauze, wrap it around your hub, turn this off to the patient, and then flush a time or two to get that fluid out. You can discard that, close that back off to the patient. You can clean the port again with a chlorhexidine swab or alcohol swab, and then make sure you're keeping this clean. Screw it back in and make it tight. Sometimes that can be put on really tight. If it is tight, take some hemostats and you can rock it backwards, just get a little bit better leverage. This is flushed, you've checked the site. Now we're going to check our monitor to make sure that our A-line waveform still looks good. You can discard your waste syringe, label your sample, send it off, and this is how you do an arterial line draw. This is what you'll be expected to do for our hour check-off. I'm going to try my best to set it up with our new mannequin so that you can actually go through the motions of silence and alarm, checking your waveform, and all that other good stuff as well.